What's going on, guys? Obi-WanJacobi here. Recently watched The Last Jedi. I guess almost, what time? It's Christmas Day, actually, when I'm making this video, so Merry Christmas. I guess about 10 days ago. And I wanted to share my thoughts on my experience watching it, a little bit about what Star Wars means to me, and then also address a couple of criticisms that seem to be kind of common with The Last Jedi. Right off the bat, this is actually the first time that I left a Star Wars movie that I had seen in the theater, and I wondered if it was my favorite in the series. I actually, believe it or not, had some very emotional moments during this film. I felt like it was really good to see a group of people continue to fight despite constant setbacks and failures. I didn't expect half of their plans to fail like they did, and to see them hang on and fight even though things really looked bad was really inspiring to me. It really kind of reminds me of a lot of the things I've faced in my own life, and I don't know, it really just kind of hit home. To me, Star Wars as a whole has kind of been that kind of a story, just a real declaration of hope, no matter what things look like or how they feel. So it really kind of hit that heartstring for me. Some other reactions that I had, and this really is not in any particular order, I was just jotting them down. I really hate Kylo Ren. During the movie, I actually started to feel like I was sort of rooting for him to have this redemptive moment, and just the way he really still made everything about himself, just like, I don't know. I don't want to see him be redeemed. I don't want to see him turn back to the light. I want to see him die in the movie, or else I'm probably going to be pretty upset. I had also recently watched The Force Awakens just prior to, just after I went to the theater to see The Last Jedi, and just watching the way he manipulated Han and killed him really just kind of drove me nuts. Which kudos to Adam Driver for the role that he's playing, because when I see his face, I have like real strong feelings about like wanting to punch it, and that just means he's doing a great job. Also, side note, I think I have a crush on Rey. Not gonna lie, I didn't find her all that attractive for whatever reason in The Force Awakens, and for some reason her strength and just I don't know, I have a little crush on Rey. Another thing I have here is why was Vice Admiral Haldo, that's the character played by Laura Dern, why was she not in uniform? That just kind of drove me a little nuts. I feel like it was just unrealistic in so many ways. Like, I know Leia, at least she has like a little bit of like an excuse or whatever, because she's more than just a general. She's like the whole leader, so it's almost like expected for her to be like a little distinct from everybody else. But for Laura Dern's character, like, that just didn't make sense. I felt like she should have been in some kind of a uniform. Luke, where he was as a character was more than a bit disappointing for me. He really was kind of tasked with, passing the baton to the next generation of Jedi as far as, rebuilding the Jedi Order. And I felt like all he did was basically just be a placeholder, and now that task falls on Rey. So I was definitely more than a little disappointed in how Luke turned out, especially when you consider some of the background. I know they don't count the EU now as far as canon goes, but Luke just seemed to be so much more than where he seemed to be when this movie started. He seemed kind of just like a wallowy baby, and I didn't really like that. I did think it was kind of cool that he had like a redemptive end, and that he faded away instead of like dying, kind of like Yoda did. I thought that was cool, staring out into the dual sunset. I felt like that was a really nice way for him to go. Another thing is, I felt like this trilogy really has pushed the envelope as far as what the Force and our perceptions of what the Force can do. It's not just like telekinesis and a little telepathy and little mind tricks and things like that and Force lightning. I felt like, mental projection and mind probes and these grand telepathic links from great distances. Like, I found myself excited to be like, man, I feel like learning about the Force is new again. So that really made me kind of excited to learn more. But yeah, it's been kind of fun, and also, it was nice to see that you didn't see these abilities, and when the Jedi Order was a little more established and immersive there. All right, now there's a few things that after I wrote down those thoughts kind of right after, and then I started to see some of the criticisms. First one, Leia and her use of the Force. So it seems like when she, and I quote, Supermans her way back to the ship even though she's in the vacuum of space, a lot of people had a real problem with this, and I find myself scratching my head as to why. If you want to talk about the science of how long someone can survive in space, I can't really go there. I've seen people make really intelligent arguments on both sides, and then you factor in the whole Force and stuff, so it's kind of like you're just gonna, I feel like a little bit you just kind of have to put that off to the side for a minute. But let's take a look at Leia. Her character is approximately 51 years old. I know Carrie Fisher was older than that when she portrayed her in this movie, but if you go and research it, those are the numbers. She's been aware of her Force sensitivity now for over 30 years, which is about a 30-year time gap between Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and then The Force Awakens. Her twin brother, Luke Skywalker, is tasked with bringing the Jedi Order back. So you have 30 years, and you have the children of Anakin Skywalker, at the very least, up until this point in the story, the most gifted Force user the galaxy has ever seen. You have a 30-year time gap where she already has begun to understand that she can feel the Force and understand it a little bit with some of the senses and things. Kind of when Han and Leia saw the second Death Star blow up, Han looked at her and said, I'm sure Luke wasn't on that. And she turns and says, yeah, he wasn't. But she knew that because there was the Force there, and she has the Force. When Obi-Wan and Yoda were like talking about Luke, saying he's our last hope, and they said, no, there's another. They were talking about Leia. So now the biggest common criticism I've seen is, well, yeah, that's all great, but she was never trained in the Force. Okay, so let's take all of the things I just said and then add 30 years of things we don't know. So you don't think, and I'm sure they don't have Christmas in Star Wars land, but you don't think at a Christmas party that they weren't, hey Luke, you know how like you sense stuff once in a while? Could you show me how you do that? Oh, you can move things too with just your mind? Awesome. Could you show me one of those things once in a while? And then have 30 years to practice it. You know what I was doing 30 years ago? I was in kindergarten 30 years ago. I've learned one or two things since then. So to sit there and say she hasn't learned how to maybe grab onto something telepathically and pull herself towards it is ridiculous. In space, there's no gravity. So all you'd have to do is have like the smallest amount of force, physical force, to actually move yourself in space. I don't know. I find that having trouble with that to be incredibly weak. And it just, like, if someone goes there with me, I just immediately am like, I don't think so. Especially when you think of this. Rey, in The Force Awakens, just learns that she has the Force, learns how to mind trick someone, learns how to grab things with the Force telepathically, and then, fight a fully trained Dark Jedi in Kylo Ren by connecting herself to the Force. Now, the time span between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, at most, is probably 3 weeks. And you're giving someone like Leia 30 years. Come on, guys. Come on. Let's see. Poe Dameron. To be honest, I like Poe. So before I go into what I'm talking about with Poe, I want to make that clear. I think he's a cool character. I think he's got a good heart. I see that he's growing emotionally and as a character. So I like that about him. But I'm having a real hard time, caring all that much about what happens to him. I know he's cool, I know he's skilled, I know he's a cocky, pilot, but I want to know what happened to his family. Does he have brothers and sisters? Why did he join the Resistance? I feel like they've just given us nothing with him, and he's this real, Han Solo-like character. and I feel like I know nothing about him. I just want to understand a little bit more about him, other than he's willing to defy authority and he's got really great pilot skills. He also seems to have sexual tension with like every woman that he comes in contact with, which, if I'm being honest, he is a very attractive man, so I totally get it. But I mean, even with Leia, Laura Dern, he sees Rey, there's like this like electricity there. It was like, whoa, okay. I wonder what's going to happen in episode 9. But nonetheless, I do kind of find myself just wanting more. Like I want to attach to this character, and I'm finding it hard to, because I just don't know anything about him. Snoke, or just so you know, anybody with Snoke, I really would love to have learned more about who he was and what he was doing, because he has seen the Empire rise and fall. I would just like to have known more about that. I'd like to know how he learned the Force. That would have been great. I think just a little bit more backstory there would have been great. At first, when I had saw him, my first thought was he was Darth Plagueis, and somehow he cheated death, and Sidious thought he killed him, but he didn't kill him, and that went there. But he is confirmed to actually not be a Sith. I don't know how familiar whoever's watching this video is. Just because you fall into the dark side and know the Force doesn't mean you're a Sith. The Sith is a Force-using order, just like the Jedi is a Force-using order. The Sith are dedicated to the dark, the Jedi dedicated to the light, but they have their own code, just like the Jedi have their own code, but you don't have to be one of the two in order to feel the Force and use the Force. So I think the closest thing Snoke would be considered would be some kind of a dark Jedi or just a dark side Force user. So if there might be a little confusion there, but he is not a Sith. I definitely would love to have learned more about him. I found that this story as a whole is really the conflict between the light and the dark, and that is really told via Rey and Kylo Ren. Not so sure I'm going to really go into much else as far as my thoughts and feelings on it. I still am waiting to give it the official "that was my favorite," because I really don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. It's new, it's fresh to me going into the movie. Empire Strikes Back was always my favorite, and I think rightfully so. But yeah, I feel like this might be a new one for me, and for many reasons. But like I said, it was nice to not feel like, hey, guess what? There's only 1 in a million chances of making that shot into the port to blow up the Death Star. But Luke Skywalker, who used to bullseye womp rats in his T-16 back home, makes the 1 in a million shot when he doesn't use his equipment. He just uses the Force. It was nice to see things like plans that they had like that fail, and yet still fight so vigorously, and really, I don't know. It just was a very inspiring movie to me. So it hits a place for me that, I'm sure I'm not going to make it sound like I'm the only one that's ever had a struggle in my life, but it hits a place for me that really resonated with a lot of my own journey. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like it's going to have a leg up there for me. And that's the cool thing about movies. It's subjective. A lot of people hate the prequels and love the originals, or think the prequels are better. I don't really care about that. It's Star Wars. I love Star Wars. Obi-WanJacobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite character. He's someone who has also been very inspiring to me, because he's seen a lot of crap in his day. Didn't go the way he wanted it to, and never wavered in his ideals or his position. And I really appreciate that about him. But I think we're coming to the end of the video. As Mesa Sean would say, Babble mode has been engaged. If you're interested in discussing this with me in a live setting, or if you want to put some comments in the comment section down below, I'd love to hear about them. I also have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Obi-WanJacobi_. Please follow, talk to me about Star Wars. I love that stuff. And if you disagree with me, that's great. That's part of what is fun about this sort of thing. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good day.